a fact, these very Parliament buildings burned down in 1906, all except for the library. But that's because we make our books out of rocks. That has nothing to do with comic books, but this does. Quies custodiet ipsos custodes. And if you don't know what that means, you need to listen to this man.
I'm here today with Alan Moore here at the Tower Bridge in London. How are you doing today, Alan?
I'm doing very well, Jackie.
Glad you could make the trip down from Northampton.
Yeah, I don't make it very often, but if there's a special reason to, I'll try and drag myself out of bed, you know.
One question that comes to mind, did you and Dave Gibbons have any idea the impact that The Watchmen was going to have?
About 3 issues in, yes. Not to start with. Originally, we planned to do just a very clever, exciting superhero book with a few neat twists. Round about the 3rd issue, something strange started to happen in the mix. You know, we started to notice that there were interesting layers of storytelling going on between what was happening in the captions, what was happening in the pictures, the dialogue, the little strip about the pirates that was embedded in the overall strip. There was a peculiar kind of interaction going on that I'd never actually seen in comics before. And when we realised we were doing it, we decided that that was what the comic was about.
With all the hoopla and excitement and enthusiasm that went down with that, like when you look back, is it something you're still proud of? Does it still hold up for you, The Watchmen?
Watchmen still holds up for me. I still think Watchmen was a great work. It's not without its flaws, no work is. The hoopla that surrounded it has rather blunted some of its appeal for me. To me, I'm often reminded of something that David Bowie said when he described himself as the face that had launched 1,000 pretensions, you know, and there's some truth about that regarding Watchmen. Watchmen did seem to open the doors for a lot of people who they'd grasped the surface of Watchmen. They'd grasped that it had got grittier violence, a more adult approach to sexuality. They probably couldn't grasp exactly how to do some of the clever semiotic stuff that we were doing, but they got the sex, the violence, the pretension, the references to popular song lyrics, things like that, which all made it very 80s and very modern. And I've seen a lot of retreads of that kind of comic sensibility since that to me have seemed depressing, pretentious, and yet I have to own up to a certain paternity there.
Right.
You know, the child is ugly, but it's probably mine. You know, and that has tended to blunt it a bit. I wouldn't like to say that Watchmen had a good effect upon comics. I think it was a good comic book, but I wouldn't like to say that it had necessarily a good effect upon comics. It might just have doomed us to 10 years of heavy-handed pretension.
Looking back on The Watchmen, Alan, is there anything you wish you'd done differently?
No, I think that I'm pretty happy with it as it was. I don't think there's anything I could have done differently. You know, it was perhaps not all of it was the book that people wanted to read, but all of it was the book that I wanted to write. What I was trying to do in Watchmen was to use a lot of comic book icons in the plot, in the characters, but to do something different with them. As such, I think it was perfectly successful at what it did. You know, it's... yeah, I'm happy with it. I'll stand by Watchmen.
As any true comic book geek will know, this is based on Alan Moore's 13-part series from the mid-1980s, and for a lot of people, Darren Aronofsky and Terry Gilliam and so many others, this was, to them, unfilmable. So I'm wondering what exactly convinced you, okay, I can do this, actually?
You know, thank God I have a teeny bit of, like, you know, I'm slightly naive, you know, that I think that it didn't occur to me to think it was unfilmable probably until about halfway through, and then, of course, it was too late to stop, so... Yeah, no, I feel like I mean, look, you know, those guys, all the other filmmakers that were attached to them, like all incredibly competent, super smart, way smarter than me, I think. But, you know, I think that I had the luxury of, you know, enough time had passed since the culture almost needed to turn, you know, in order for the movie to make sense, you know, and I think now it does.
Well, good old Warner's, when they saw the success of 300, there's a $56 million movie, what it was, made up $456 million around the world. They decided, we don't know what's going on here, but you obviously know how to make these movies. Was there a sense of compromise? I think you wanted $150 million originally for your budget. They gave you, I think, about 120 or 100, whatever it was. Was it exactly the film you wanted to make, or was there always going to be this sense of, I've got to work my way through this now because it's a big film?
I think in the end, the movie probably couldn't be more Watchmen-y, I mean, for me. So I don't feel like we compromised at all. I mean, I think you could tell that from just the kind of way we made it. So, yeah, no, I feel like they've Warner Brothers anyway is really they went all the way, if you will.
Well, when always dealing with a movie that goes over the 2 hour mark, the studios are always nervous, and this is like 166 minutes, and they did argue that with you too long. But also, what they said that was too violent and too sexy, which I'm guessing for you is a plus rather than a minus, because you want that part of this world is too violent and too sexy.
Yeah, it really is. It's it is too violent and too sexy. Well, I mean, and too long, But I feel like that is the movie. That was. I guess you're right. I mean, when I thought about it, I guess my feeling was like, well, then we've succeeded in some way. That if that's the reaction, It's funny because I think the thing that's interesting about the film in some ways is that, yeah, it's super violent and a lot of the violence is shocking, but part of that reason is like when you read the graphic novel, for me, Alan punishes you a little bit for liking comic book violence, Part of it is that like you understand, if you're a comic book fan or a fan of comic book movies, I think if you haven't read a comic book, it's okay to see Watchmen, because if you've seen a comic book film or know that comic books exist, you're kind of prepared for it. But it's that whole thing of he lures you into a scenario where in a normal comic book film or the violence you would get would be really sort of morally clear, where he kind of there's a little bit, you get a little bit of punishment for assuming that everything's going to be like glossed over and clean and easy to understand. I think that's where the movie kind of comes at you a little bit.
Well, I know you've got 2 of the guys involved in the book, Gibbons and Higgins, are kind of on board, and they help with the posters, and they've sort of been involved in the production. But good old grumpy Alan Moore has turned his back on Hollywood, and he took his name off this. He just didn't want to be involved because he's had some of his projects kind of peed on by Hollywood, V for Vendetta and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Do you think, I don't know, part of you kind of would love him to see this? Do you think what he'd make of it, or?
Like I'm not going to speculate about how he's going to feel or how he feels. He's asked that we don't approach him or talk to him about it, and I'm a fan, so I don't want to offend anybody. So as far as I'm concerned, what Alan wants, Alan should get.
There is the line in the movie, who's watching the Watchmen? But of course, when it comes to March 6th, it's not so much who, but how many. And I don't know whether that's something that kind of you actually get nervous when faced after all this work you put into it and all the attention to detail that really, as Hollywood is these days, the opening weekend is a real test of what
I guess that's true. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I do get nervous about that, but on the other hand, it's like I feel like we made a really bold and interesting movie.
Can you talk about the creation of some of the real life characters that are in this, like Nixon, what you wanted to bring to that as far as the look of the character?
Yeah, I felt like as soon as we decided that we were not going to go with stock footage for the, there's no stock footage in the movie except for a little bit on TV, but 99.9% of the footage, and especially in regard to any historical characters that are in the film, that's all just, makeup effects and lookalikes, because that was the only way that we thought of we could. Because once you establish that you're going with lookalikes, you can kind of like, it's like Frost Nixon or the Queen or whatever, it's like you just, the world, you just say, okay, that's that person, like you start to, once you get the vocabulary of the movie, you get it. So, yeah, I mean, that was quite a process in looking for those doubles or looking for those people that we thought look like a little bit like Nixon. And then, yeah, I mean, like his nose is a little bit bigger than Nixon's nose, and not much bigger though. If you actually look at a profile of Nixon, it's pretty crazy. But it was fun, to recreate those characters, because I also felt like those doubles. The point of it is to give the movie some sort of, pop culture reference point, So you're in this movie with these crazy superheroes, but as soon as you can, like, see a Nixon or see a Kennedy, you can kind of find your place. They're like islands of reality inside of this sort of world that is kind of, this mystical, like, imaginary world. But you can sort of like, oh, right, Nixon, got it. Or like, oh, Kissinger, oh, look, there's, Mick Jagger, like you can kind of find your way by these touchdowns.
And the Village People, that was actually
the Village People, of course.
Shocking to me that they were in the background. I was like, Village People.
Yeah, you know, I love that shot because it was sort of about like, so it's a shot of Ozzy, and you know he's standing outside of Studio 54. It's in the title sequence. It's just one little vignette shot, but it was cool to me because not only is it just cool to see the Village People and you know Mick Jagger and like, but it's also cool. I liked it because it was sort of people have always said like superheroes are ridiculous, you know, like we would have people dressed up in costumes like walking around, and I'm like, really, you know, like you look at that shot and you think like, wow, I guess. You know, we accept the Village People without really batting an eye. We accept, you know, Ziggy Stardust without like really.
The mistake you're making is that film storyboards are like comics. They're not. Film storyboards, they are, and anyway, film storyboards are a guide to the film, which is a completely different medium. There were things that I was doing in Watchmen, which were, and in most of my comics books, they're designed not to be, they're designed to show off what the comics medium can do. They weren't designed to be films. Therefore, the only way that a film could be made, I mean, imagine, if you want to make yourself feel ill for a moment, imagine the film of Lost Girls. And yes, there were some suggested, and I left that entirely to Melinda. I said, well, I've made my position clear. I don't care if any of my contributors, or co-contributors and co-creators, if they want a film made, I'm not going to stop them. I just don't want my name on it, and they can have all the money. Melinda looked at the proposition and thought, oh no, if these pictures were moving, you know, Lost Girls has got a tableau vivant quality about it. The figures are still. The audience is filling in the interleaved scenes, the bits between the panels, the movement. They're doing all that themselves. Whereas if it was a film, it would just be a grunting porn film like most of the others, with a few pretentious flourishes. It would. And it's like when they came to do the V for Vendetta, or let's say the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen film, or the V for Vendetta film, or the From Hell film, which I believe was at least one of the better. I've not seen any of these because, as I've pointed out, I do prefer to criticise things from a position of complete ignorance. but with From Hell, what had that got to do with my comic? I mean, From Hell is 600 pages long, including the appendices. It is utilising comic book story techniques. So what they did was a completely different story, which had got some characters from my book, which took me and Eddie Campbell 10 years to complete because we were researching it. They came up with a completely different story with the V for Vendetta film. There was a lot of the techniques which they couldn't reproduce, and they missed out all of the, I understand from people who have seen the film, they missed out all of the important kind of dialogue about violence and whether it's okay for someone to kill people just because they're the hero of a comic strip or movie. Why should somebody who's the title character, what, do they get a free pass? Whatever their behaviour is. We had quite a careful debate in that strip about, is it all right ever to use violence? And I think that we came down firmly on the side of no, it's not. But sometimes people do. And all of that was missed out. Also, it was done as a direct response to the Margaret Thatcher years. It was done when the National Front were gaining, that was, for younger listeners, the National Front was what we used to call like the British National Party or the English Defence League or whatever they're called now. They were on the rise, Margaret Thatcher was in office. We were specifically responding to that. Whereas the American people making the film, they don't care about all that. They wanted to make it into a parable
for 9/11, and you know, make it a bit contemporary, and in fact sort of about what had happened in America. Now, during the Thatcher years, when I wanted to comment upon that, I did a story that was like set in Britain. If they wanted to do something about 9/11, couldn't they have come up with their own story? Something like that? The thing is, what is the film is a medium. Yes, it's great. We're planning something at the moment, something that has been written especially for film. Hopefully it'll be out by the end of the year. Adapting from one medium to another, I know that it's automatic and it's reflexive, but there's no reason for it other than to make money. And there's no reason for it other than if something has sold well in one medium, then let's make it into a film, let's make it into a television series, let's make it into a computer game, let's make it into a t-shirt, let's make it into a bubblegum card collection. Let's do all. Why? Well, because we'll make a lot of money out of it. There are no creative reasons whatsoever. And one of the problems with film, all right, we're doing film in a way that it's not costing very much. I mean, all right, it's about a 40-minute film. It'll cost us about £100,000. In context of hour-and-a-half Hollywood films, 2-hour Hollywood films that cost $300 million, I think we're being fairly frugal. And also, we are writing it specifically for cinema. My favourite films are ones that were written for cinema, like they used to be back in the old days. They weren't an adaptation of a comic book or a television series that everybody loved in the 1960s, or a television series that everybody hated in the 1960s, or, in the case of Pirates of the Caribbean, a Disneyland ride. And as I have said, we will live to see Johnny Depp playing Captain Crunch. Breakfast cereal mascots will be the next thing. I mean, it's like, yeah, I don't see, it might entertain people for a few minutes, but I'm not interested in it because it's not the story that I was trying to tell. And so therefore, if somebody's going, yeah, we're going to do a story that's got a few of your characters in, maybe, and some other characters that we've just thrown in because we felt like it. We've given it a different story because yours wouldn't really work for a movie audience, you know. In that case, why do it at all? Well, yeah, actually, I know why, because it's got the name of my work attached to it, and if I hadn't done an awful lot of struggling and cursing people in a very strict technical sense, I would have had to have had my name on the Watchmen film and the V for Vendetta film, and people would think, oh well, I've seen the film, I guess that was like the book. I'm really proud of my work. You know, I put a lot of attention and care into it. I certainly don't want people looking at the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and thinking, oh yeah, I saw that thing with Sean Connery. No, I didn't like that. You know, and just confusing the two, which invariably happens in modern culture. So that's why I've got nothing against the film medium, although I would point out, if you want to be a comic artist or a comic writer, what you need is a biro and a piece of paper. If you plan to be somebody who works in the film medium, you are going to need a lot more than that. Which means that it's inevitably, you've got to have money people involved with films. This is one of the things why it's taken us 2 years to get a deal whereby we are not being funded by people who want anything other than to just be involved in the film. We own everything. That's taken a long time. Most people can't do that. It's sort of, But that's a general problem, I think, with film. It is very costly, and it's not very easy to work in cinema. It's getting easier. It's getting.
So, walking out of the screening, I talked to Lloyd Levin, and the first thing I said to him was, I can't believe a major motion picture studio made this movie. Mm-hmm. And I'm just sort of curious, the process of getting a movie like this made, because this is not a standard superhero movie. This isn't mainstreamed up. You haven't taken it and turned it around into something that will obviously appeal to the mall audience. You've kept the spirit of the book, and you've kept the art of the story and the depth of it. That process, how hard was that, dealing with Warner Brothers from day one?
I mean, look, it was hard, and they, understandably hard, I think.
Right.
Look, I got to give credit to them, because in the end, it's they can always say no, right? If they pay for it, So, really, the fact I think that they let me go all the way with it is, a tribute to their confidence in just the kind of movie that we made.
Right.
I mean, Jeff said to me, like, you made an awesome movie, and I think that it should be what it is. At the point when we were talking about, like, okay, what do we, like, I showed them my director's cut, and they were like, okay. It was interesting because, normally the way the process works is, you show the studio the cut, and then you're supposed to have a meeting, like, right after, like an hour after that. Right. Everyone gets their notes together and we talk about it. But they were like, we can't have, we can't, like, our brains are fried. So it was literally 2 days later that we actually sat down to talk about it. So it was pretty, and that's been my sort of, it's been funny that's been a typical reaction from, I just did press screenings in Australia, and the press had to come straight from the screening to talk to me. And everyone was pretty much like, they were like, they're just having a hard time, like, knowing what to ask or how to process the movie, which I think is the right reaction. Right. I mean, that's what I wanted, But, I think that the truth is, I talked about, like, look, when I first got the script for the movie, or the concept for the movie it was a PG-13 movie. It was 2 hours long. It was sequelable.
Right.
Adrian dies, killed by Night Owl at the end, very little Manhattan, very little comedian's funeral. It's just Rorschach, no interrogation. These are things that were like, that was the movie, very super clean Hollywood movie. So, I mean, I really gotta say that, and it was updated to the War on Terror. All that stuff was real. I mean, at that time it wasn't exactly the War on Terror; it was just updated to modern time. That was the one note that I had been given. They're saying, like, we love the script, we wish it was like the War on Terror rather than just like a modern conflict.
Right.
And when I turned them back in a 1985 R-rated, long script that, I think by the time I actually put my storyboards together and put it all together, it was like a 160-page script. That's a nightmare for a studio. 160-page script, R-rated movie with, not huge movie stars in it. It's like, what are you doing?
Based on the Grumpy Alan Moore's 13-part 1980s comic book series, which has built an awful lot of a dedicated fan base over the 20 years. Given that, especially, and it's whatever about the production itself, I don't know if a part of you was slightly scared that you've got these kind of people who will look at every little detail that you do, and if they don't like the fact that it's different from their comic book, they're going to complain all over the internet. Was there a concern at all from that point of view?
Absolutely. A lot of this movie was based in fear.
Certainly kept us honest out there.
Yeah.
Knowing that we're, in the pressure cooker.
Yeah, highly aware of what people were thinking, during, before, during, and after filming. The fans for Watchmen are passionate, to say the least, about this source material, and what they need to be assured of is that so are we, and none more so than Zack, who directed this thing. Nobody wanted to remain more faithful and true to this book than Zack. So,
and he nailed it, man. Right? I mean, he just
out of the park.
blew us. We just saw the movie a couple weeks ago, and we were both just like, I mean, blown away. Absolutely blown away.
It's a lot of stuff to squeeze into a 2.5-hour movie, and I really think he captured the essence of this thing. And I think the fans of Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons are going to be happy.
Just a deconstruct of this superhero movie. It's a superhero movie that is for adults and has adult ideas in it. You don't have to think about it any harder than that. I mean, it goes way deeper. If you want to, you can tear it apart like a giant onion and keep peeling it until you're at its core. But I think that it's cool to experience it, just like when I read the comic book for the first time. And I didn't know. No one was telling me like what it's about or the why of it. You come to it fresh, and sometimes I wish I had that experience because I would love to see the movie or read the book for the first time again because that feeling was for me awesome. Especially when you go into something with this anticipation that it's just a Hollywood superhero movie, which is what a lot of people will think because they don't know, right? They see some guys like fighting, and then when you see the film, you actually have this experience of it, being taken apart. That those archetypes, those mythological shapes, whether they be Batman or Superman or any of superheroes, and how they're just like sort of turned around, whether it's like through sexual fetish or fighting, like actually killing guys they fight, like stuff like that, or whether it's the end of the movie and there's this, sort of the moral dilemma that is the end of the movie is also like a really, it's challenging on all those levels. What I try to do, and I mean the only tool I have is my point of view on the things that when I read it the first time, those ideas that most struck me throughout the whole book, and then so I just tried to kind of extract those ideas, the things that are quintessentially Watchmen, that can exist in no other material but Watchmen, and those are the things that I really tried to focus on. You have this character Rorschach, who is a very sort of film noirish. He wears a fedora. He has this mask that has a moving Rorschach pattern on it, so that when he looks into a criminal's face, they see maybe something in their own soul. And he's very he looks at the world in a very sort of black and white, good and evil. Evil must be punished. Night Owl, who is sort of a Batman-esque, gadget-based superhero with he has a utility belt and he uses technology and he has like an owl ship and stuff like that, and a cave under his house. Well, I mean that sort of takes you talks about all the superheroes. I think this whole thing of like, are they their character, the character of them as a superhero, or are they themselves when they're not dressed like their superhero? And that's kind of one of the questions the movie asks, like, which are you? Are you your superhero identity, or are you your alter ego? Like, or are you your secret identity, or are you your alter ego? Those are the questions. Silk Spectre, who is this second generation superhero. Her mother was a superhero, now she is, and she just pretty much kicks ass. And that was like one of the things, like, her outfit is like incredibly sexy, right? And we were saying that like in a modern superhero film, they try and tone down the sexuality in the costumes as much as they can, because they don't want people saying like, oh, you're exploiting the sexuality of this woman in your superhero movie. And in Watchmen, it's kind of about that. She uses that, that's why, like it's a comment on the fact that in some ways in other superhero movies they try to sort of gloss over that concept because it becomes very adult. This idea that these superheroes are sort of turned on by their own costumes and they find sort of sexual power in this, in fighting crime, and they get turned on by it and all sorts of things like that, which you would never see in Fantastic Four or some movie like that. We have Dr. Manhattan, who is the blue godlike creature, who is a scientist who was turned into. He's the only Watchman with actual powers, and he through an accident was turned into this God man, and no one knows the limits of his power. He could, who knows if he could create galaxies, what he could do. So he's super powerful, but of course he's broken because he loves the world, he loves people, but he can't figure out why they're so brutal, why they're so, all the things that make us unique are things that perplex him, and so he has a hard time with people. Ozymandias, who is kind of the most, the pinnacle of what humanity can become. Like physically, there's no sort of human that is his equal, and mentally, he's supposed to be the smartest man in the world. So he has a great influence on the Watchmen and on the world. Yeah, the comedian, who is he is brutal and uncompromising, but at the same time he also he does see the gray areas in the world, like he laughs about the contradictions in society. In the end, it's worked out really well because for me it's like another, you need to get into the world immediately, and you have to see, like for instance, the character of the comedian, he has to only be the comedian to you. He can't be someone else as well. And I think that's the cool thing about what Jeffrey brings, and I think the same thing with Patrick and Jackie, and they're all very. When you see them in the movie, they are those characters.